Deshawn Hall is headed to Auburn. Penn State and Matt Campbell miss out on their most important offensive recruits in this cycle. And that's not even the worst part about all of this.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
My name is Zach Seyko, your host as always. Thank you so much for being here. We're going to grill Penn State for this one. We have to. This is a generally positive show about what Matt Campbell and what Penn State football are working towards. But man, did they mess up here? Friendly reminder to let me know your thoughts down in the comment section as Deshawn Hall commits to Auburn. We're going to talk about the bad part. The worst part about them missing Deshawn Hall is not just about them not getting Hall's commitment. Why Penn State missed on Deshawn Hall? Is it NIL? Is it that their recruitment, their pitch just wasn't that great? And a valuable lesson that Matt Campbell is going to learn from all of this. Will they land Khalil Taylor? Other priority prospects to watch. We're going to cover all of it in today's episode. So starting with Deshawn Hall committing to Auburn, that was Penn State's most important offensive target, if you ask me, because there are not a lot of other players like him, and he is a perfect puzzle piece in Penn State's offense. They were all in. If they could have had any receiver, they're right. They wanted all of them. They wanted Jameer Dean. They wanted Khalil Taylor. And I guess Khalil Taylor's recruitment isn't over. We're going to talk about that in a second. But Landon Bloom, they wanted all four of these guys. And now they could potentially end up with just one prospect out of this bunch in Landon Bloom. That's the bad part of it. The bad part is not just missing on Deshawn Hall. It's the fact that Penn State had no contingency plan. They were ultra confident. They were ultra confident that they were going to win at least 3 out of 4 of these. Khalil Taylor, Bloom was going to stay committed, and that surely they'll get Deshawn Hall, Khalil Taylor, maybe Jameer Dean flips away to Georgia, right? Because I think, notice how Jameer Dean flipped away first. Because I think Penn State was in the understanding that, okay, well, we'll get Deshawn Hall. We'll get Khalil Taylor. So therefore, we can afford to let Jameer Dean go to Georgia. And that's, I can't believe it got to this point. That is seriously bad. It's not just missing on a prospect. It's the fact that there was no backup plan. There are no, okay, there's still Khalil Taylor, right? He's announcing July 6th between Penn State and Nebraska. And we'll talk about more on that in just a moment. There's nobody else after Deshawn Hall. There's nobody else after Jameer Dean. There's Landon Bloom. There's Khalil Taylor, potentially. But you can't go down the big board for another prospect at this point in time. Maybe there's a player that shows up later on in the recruiting cycle. Maybe you're able to flip somebody. But Penn State doesn't have any points of leverage. And then on top of that, you don't get the player that can take your offense to another level. Deshawn Hall is there are not a lot of athletic 6'5" wide receivers that are extremely talented. There are big body wide receivers that are good. You have one of them in Landon Bloom already, but you want more than just one. Deshawn Hall was going to be able to help. Again, the role that Chase Sowell is going to play, I'm not sure what Penn State's future plans are beyond him. And Deshawn Hall is a true freshman, really could have played immediately. So you can see he's top 20 in the nation as a wide receiver prospect, but there aren't many. The next one is Sales out of the state of Indiana. So if we're talking about big body athletic receivers, he was the next best one after the best wide receiver in the country. And Penn State was all in on him. Penn State wanted Deshawn Hall above anybody else besides Bloom. Let's talk about these three: Dean, Taylor, and Deshawn Hall. They would have preferred Deshawn Hall from those three. But now you're in a spot where potentially you could go 0-3. Why did Penn State miss on Deshawn Hall? He's an Alabama prospect and chose an Alabama area school. So I can't be mad at Matt Campbell for that. And this isn't the first time that Penn State loses a recruitment like this. Does anybody remember Alvin Henderson, running back commit? What was it? The class of 2022 or 2023? I think it's been a couple of years now. Alabama native, committed to Penn State, and in a matter of days, weeks, flipped to the Auburn Tigers. So don't look at this and say, well, Matt Campbell can't recruit. I just think Matt Campbell had a faulty strategy here for this instance. It's not a matter of, oh, he can't recruit. It's just you didn't handle this one correctly. Should Penn State should they have spent so much time, effort, and resources into trying to land Deshawn Hall out of the state of Alabama? If you believe that he is a player that can truly unlock your offense, then I see it worth trying. But no contingency plan is where I draw the line, as I pointed out here multiple times. It wasn't about NIL. At least that's not what I heard. Penn State had comparable offers. I heard from sources that Penn State and Auburn were going back and forth, that this was a heavily contentious recruitment, that money was not an issue. Resources were not an issue. There is a stigma around players from the SEC country leaving to go to the Big Ten. It happens. Don't get me wrong. But there is truly, you look at the quote that Deshawn Hall gave around his commitment, and he alludes to the fact that, hey, I want to play close to home and be around friends and family. When everything else is even, when the recruitments are equal, when the resources are equal, proximity is going to be that deciding factor. And when it is typical for prospects, whether that's from Alabama, other parts of SEC country, versus a school from the Northeast, you better have everything else checked, or else you're not winning the proximity battle. You're never going to win the proximity battle. So I don't chalk this up to Penn State didn't have a good pitch. Penn State didn't have any good promises, or I think they out-recruited Auburn at the end of the day. Alex Golesh versus Matt Campbell. But Penn State still had to do more than just match Auburn because you had the proximity factor. So the lesson here that you learn about this recruitment is you cannot put all your eggs into one basket like this, especially when it comes to a prospect that is ways away from the Northeast. And Matt Campbell had to learn this one. Penn State was in the understanding that they were going to get Deshawn Hall. It has been suggested that he was essentially verbally committed. You cannot take that at its word. Same thing with Jahmyr Dean. You cannot take that at its word. That's the lesson here. And Matt Campbell's been recruiting at Iowa State, but I guess things are different now because you're Big Ten. You were never getting Deshawn Hall's attention at Iowa State. But now you're getting his attention being at Penn State. So I guess Matt Campbell and company had to learn this one the rough way. And it's not the end of the world. But if you keep letting it happen, then yeah, that is not going to be ideal moving forward. So get this one done and over with, move on, and now try to focus on what's next. You got other targets that you got to land. Will they land Khalil Taylor? Because apparently it's not looking that great. Will they land Dhillon McGee out of the state of Texas? We're going to get to that here coming up next on Locked On Nittany Lions. Today's show is brought to you by Indeed. Workplace chaos, it can show up fast. That's where Indeed Sponsored Jobs comes in. Indeed Sponsored Jobs helps you reach the candidates who actually fit what you are looking for based on skills, experience, and location. Finding the right person can make all the difference, whether it's building a business or building a winning team. The best organizations aren't trying to look at every possible option. They are focused on identifying people who truly match what they're looking for. When you can spend more time evaluating great candidates and less time searching, everybody benefits. That's exactly what Indeed Sponsored Jobs is designed to help businesses do. So spend less time searching, more time actually interviewing candidates who check all your boxes, less stress, less time, more results with Indeed sponsored jobs. And listeners of this show will get a $75 sponsored job credit to help get your job the premium status it deserves at Indeed.com/podcast. Just go to Indeed.com/podcast right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Do you need to hire? This is a job for Indeed sponsored jobs. Today's show is brought to you by Odoo. Running a business shouldn't feel like you're trying to connect a bunch of systems that were never designed to work together. One app for accounting, another for inventory, another for sales, and somehow none of them talk to each other. That's where Odoo comes in. Odoo is an all-in-one business management software that brings every part of your business together in one powerful platform. From sales and accounting to inventory and marketing, everything works in one place, helping your team move faster, stay organized, and focus on growing the business instead of managing software. Now, think about the hiring of Matt Campbell by Penn State. The adjustment itself was important, but what's really impressive is how smoothly it has been implemented. Everyone knows their role. Everyone's on the same page, and that's usually what will separate a great organization, a great team from just a good one. Great organizations win because operations matter, and that's why you should get Odoo. Try for free today at odoo.com/lockedon. That is odoo.com/lockedon. And remember, you can listen to Locked On Nittany Lions ad-free by becoming a member of the Everydayer Club. Plus, you will get access to a members-only Discord server to talk all things Penn State sports. Visit LockedOnNittanyLions.supercast.com or check the link down in the show notes to learn more. Dhillon McGee, Penn State fans, people who are following Penn State recruiting will know the Texas cornerback is set to make a decision soon with Penn State right there. Penn State potentially leading with a Rivals insider projecting him to the Nittany Lions. But will Penn State get Khalil Taylor? Does Penn State need to get Khalil Taylor at this point in time? And the answer is yes. You would like Penn State to get Khalil Taylor in this recruiting class. He is one of the best prospects in the state of Pennsylvania. So we talk about Deshawn Hall, Alabama kid, staying home to play at the Alabama school with Auburn. So Penn State, in theory, that should be the same thing with Khalil Taylor being the Pennsylvania guy, staying home to play at Penn State. But Nebraska is not making this easy. It's Penn State versus Nebraska all the way. And I can tell you this from what I know, what's been told to me about Nebraska and how they're approaching this. They're desperate when it comes to wide receiver recruiting. They are willing to pay as much money. That's how it seems to be for a prospect like Khalil Taylor because they missed out on other priority targets. But things are kind of lining up here in the same way where Penn State also missed out on its priority targets. So I'm not sure ultimately who is going to be, we'll see at the end of the day, right? Who Khalil Taylor, because July 6th is when he commits. That is still a ways away. I think a lot could change over the next 2 weeks. It doesn't look or it doesn't sound favorable because the Penn State side of it, it's shaky. People are questioning it. And Nebraska believes that they're in the driver's seat, that this is going to happen. So the Cornhuskers and Matt Rule seem to have the momentum here. So if we want to answer this now 2 weeks early and say whether or not Penn State's going to land Khalil Taylor, I would probably say that it's not going to happen. Does Penn State need Khalil Taylor? Should they get into a bidding war to try to land Khalil Taylor? And that's kind of where I struggle with things, because as much as I think it's important for Penn State to land a Pennsylvania prospect, one of the best in the state, a player that can open up the offense in different ways from Deshawn Hall, not in similar ways, in different ways, that is always going to be valuable. But if Nebraska is just looking for a recruiting win, if they believe that they've missed out on all their priority targets at wide receiver and they want to go all in and spend all the money, I can see why Penn State isn't going to try to do that. Do you want one player to take up the entire recruiting budget? Is it worth it? So the circumstances are a little bit different here because Penn State was being aggressive with Deshawn Hall. They simply did not win that one, in my mind, because of proximity. But when it comes to Khalil Taylor, you have budgets, you have to manage the finances. So I can see if Penn State is going to be hesitant here. If all things are equal in terms of resources, I think Penn State did a much better job recruiting Khalil Taylor. But if Nebraska is going to go ahead and significantly offer more money in NIL to Khalil Taylor, does Penn State want to play that game? Because I can understand the need at wide receiver right now. But overspending a ton of your budget when you still have to put a team together. And Penn State's offense isn't necessarily built around a ton of wide receivers. Thank goodness for the portal. I think somebody will emerge down the stretch. But it's something that Penn State, again, didn't handle the best. They didn't handle this situation the best. And it's not an indicator that, oh, this is always going to be the case, but we can talk about this for what it is, and that Penn State just did not handle wide receiver recruiting properly here. I want to pivot to Dhillon McGee because we talk about this stretch of losses. Penn State just landed Case Alexander, who is a 4-star linebacker. Rivals has him just outside of the top 10 for his position. Elijah Guertin, 6'5", 250-pound defensive end. Penn State's beating Oklahoma in that recruitment for Alexander, Florida for Guertin, and now they could potentially beat Texas and SMU. When has Penn State beat Texas in a recruitment? When have they done that? Because the Nittany Lions right now are favored. I wouldn't say significantly, but they are favored to win the recruitment of Dhillon McGee against Texas and SMU. He's 15 miles from SMU. SMU is right in his backyard. The Texas Longhorns, the prestige, staying in state. So we talk about Penn State losing some of these other battles when they're winning ones that you would never see over the past 5 years. Penn State over Oklahoma, Penn State. And I know the recruiting connections. I know the family connections. Well, Cooper Alexander plays for Penn State. He was 15 miles away from Oklahoma. He grew up as a fan. That still matters. Dad was a legacy, Steven Alexander. That's not just because his brother plays at Penn State. Okay, and Florida making a push for Elijah Guertin. That was somebody that they really wanted, and Penn State wins that recruitment. So how many times was Penn State winning recruitments against Florida? Those still matter. The win over Oklahoma matters. These losses, they sting, but it is not an indicator. It is not a full-scale indicator of terrible recruiting. And Dhillon McGee, I think, is underrated as he is playing some of the best competition when it comes to Texas area football. He has all the measurables that you want. This is a guy that if he works hard and reaches his potential, he is similar to what he can do as far as being he's versatile. He can be a boundary corner. He's going to be a boundary corner in my mind, but he could play safety, right? It's the way that he's able to work in man coverage and in zone coverage. But I've been impressed with his man coverage skills, how he can play press coverage, back off. And this is the kind of prospect that Terry Smith wants at Penn State. So you can land him, get him with Keyshawn Telfair, the defensive back room, and then what you have with Karan Caesar, the guys at safety, and Jonathan Gillette and Caleb Cooper. The secondary has really come together after some turbulence there too. So wide receiver recruiting, it's bad. It didn't go as planned, but the rest of the class is still in pretty good shape, I would say. Hey, that's where we're going to wrap things up on this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Appreciate each and every one of you for checking out the show. Friendly reminder, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. And for more conversations around Penn State recruiting, Penn State football in general, Penn State wrestling, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions.